The year is 2001, the month is November, and the day is the 4th. It's about 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, but 8:30 p.m. where this baseball game is being played. Phoenix, Arizona, with 49,589 people plus the players, coaches, team personnel on both sides, about to witness the New York Yankees continue to mark their territory on the baseball world in the most dominating fashion we've ever seen since the late 40s and early 50s, when they won 5 championships in a row. Well, the Yankees are on an ultimate roll again, having won 3 championships in a row now, are up by a run in the bottom of the 9th inning in Game 7 of the World Series with the greatest closer in the history of baseball in the game ready to finish things. This one is as good as over. But how did we get here? So join me, you awesome supporters of the channel, and even the 67% not subscribed yet. You're welcome too, although I hope you leave that 67%, but let's dive into how the Yankees got here. The Yankees had a great year in 2001, just a solid all-around team per usual. The hitting was really good, the starting rotation had some serious dudes at the top, like Mike Mussina, Roger Clemens, Andy Pettitte. The bullpen was solid, with the team winning 95 games, finishing 13.5 games over the second place Red Sox, winning 3 games in a row to beat Oakland in the first round after losing the first 2. Despite winning 116 games, the most ever in baseball history, the Seattle Mariners were no match for the Yankees, with New York winning the ALCS in 5 games, winning the pennant, and rolling on to their 4th straight World Series appearance with a chance at their 4th straight title. In order to do this, they were going to have to go through the Arizona Diamondbacks, and that wasn't perceived by most to be very hard or much of a challenge. The D-backs were a good team, obviously. They were in the World Series, but clearly not as sexy as the Yankees. They had some incredible hitters on the offense, 2 absolute studs and legends at the top of the rotation in Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson, and a pretty good bullpen. Good stuff, but overall, this D-backs team didn't have many advantages. One advantage they definitely were getting was home field advantage, because back in 2001, they just flip-flopped who had home field advantage in the World Series every year. In 2000, the American League got it, so in 2001, the National League got it. It was as simple as that. So the D-backs were promised at least the first 2 games at home in Arizona and the last 2 if necessary. Now looking back, that ended up arguably being the biggest factor. Well, one of the biggest. The Diamondbacks took games 1 and 2 at home seemingly with ease. Curt Schilling dominated in Game 1 and so did Randy Johnson in Game 2. Neither game was really that close in the end, forcing the Yankees to go back home with some pressure to get themselves back into the series, and that proved to be no issue for them whatsoever. Well, they at least got it done. The Yankees went on to win games 3, 4, and 5 at Yankee Stadium. It wasn't easy at all. They won each game by a single run, with it taking extra innings after tying it with 2 outs in the 9th and late game walk-off heroics to win games 4 and 5. Game 4 was when Derek Jeter became Mr. November with his walk-off homer. Alfonso Soriano's walk-off single would send the series back to Phoenix, with the Yankees just 1 win away from yet another championship, and it was just demoralizing for the D-backs, obviously. Like I said and just showed, it was far from easy. They literally won all 3 of those games by 1 run, and they had to be really clutch doing it. But it was such typical Yankee fashion, continuing what they've been doing for so long. Dominating, and when not dominating and maybe even looking like things might go south, coming up clutch, tying the game with 2 outs in the 9th and ending up on top in the end. And at this point, everyone's assuming the Yankees will do what was expected of them before the series began. Another World Series win. Well, Game 6 kept this weird pattern going. The D-backs won games 1 and 2 pretty soundly in Arizona. The Yankees won games 3, 4, and 5 in New York by barely hanging on. So if you understand the pattern, naturally, the D-backs would blow the Yankees out of the water in Game 6 back at home 15-2. This series ain't over yet. It's going to take at least another day. And at this point, what, were the D-backs going to just blow them out in Game 7? Every game in New York was close, but every game in Arizona was a blowout in favor of the D-backs. So was that how this works? Well, no, because Game 7 ended up becoming one of the more iconic games of all time. The game was scoreless until the bottom of the 6th, when a double by Danny Bautista gave the D-backs a 1-0 lead, but the Yankees answered right back, scoring once in the 7th on a Tino Martinez base hit and a leadoff homer by Alfonso Soriano in the 8th to give the Yankees the lead. 6 outs away from a 4-peat, and in came Mariano Rivera. Luis Gonzalez, see ya. Matt Williams, see ya. Steve Finley would knock a single to start a potential rally, but the next guy up, Danny Bautista, see ya. The Yankees would go 1-2-3 in the 9th, but they were now just 3 outs away from 4 straight championships. The greatest closer in history is on the mound. This one is as good as over. Well, not quite. Mark Grace would loop a leadoff single to start another potential rally for the D-backs and immediately get pinch ran by David DeLucy. Next man up, Damian Miller, would put a bunt down just to get DeLucy over to scoring position. Rivera tried to nail him at second to prevent that, only for the ball to skip into center field, 2 on, nobody out. The D-backs tried the bunt play again, but this time it didn't do anything, going right back to Rivera, who'd throw to third for the force out. And at this point, bunting wasn't going to save you anymore. You were going to need a big hit, someone to come through in the clutch. So who would that be? Enter Tony Womack. By 2001, and in this game in particular, Tony Womack was a 31-year-old journeyman. Kinda. The D-backs were only his second team, but it was his 5th full season. The first 2 were in Pittsburgh, the team that drafted him, and the last 3 including 2001 with Arizona. And his career would eventually end with him making stops with 5, technically 6 other teams in the span of 3 years, and going to the Cubs twice. At that point in his career, by the end of it, teams caught on to Womack and his lack of ability on a baseball field. To put it simply, he was terrible. I really do hate saying that, and I don't want anything to seem personal, but he just wasn't a good player. He was a bad hitter and didn't even play good defense. So the one thing that kept him around long enough, his speed, and I think batting average. It's pretty interesting now that I think about it, but Tony Womack seems like a player who wouldn't last nearly as long as he did back then in today's game. It's a fascinating way of looking at it, but when Womack first broke through and made it to the big leagues and played his first several seasons, he was terrible, yet still was able to be his team's full-time shortstop. Why is this? Well, I think batting average. This was before Moneyball and before analytics even had much of an impact on the game at all, let alone taking over the game of baseball. I'm not completely sure what teams looked at to evaluate players back then, but I don't think they looked at OPS plus or any of that. I think the D-backs, just like the Pirates and any other team in the league, looked at batting average. And if you just looked at Tony Womack's batting average, you think he was a consistently above average bat who's also fast on the bases. Look at 1998, for example. Womack's sophomore season and last season with the Pirates, his batting average was .282 and he stole 60 bases, the most in the National League. If you just looked at those two numbers, you'd assume he was getting MVP votes. In reality, he wasn't productive at all. A 100 OPS plus is league average. For context, Womack's OPS plus that year was 23 points below that. He was by far a bad hitter, not even average or anywhere near it. Bad. He played in almost every game and had so many plate appearances while also recording 185 hits for the 1998 season, which again seems good, but with added context, Womack was a weak hitter. He provided no power whatsoever, he didn't walk a ton at all, and was just a very quiet overall .282 hitter, and I mean things just got worse. In 1999, his first year with the D-backs, his OPS plus was 23 points below league average, but in 2000 it was 29 points below. In 2001, 36 points below. He did have a really magical and emotional moment on Father's Day that year in 01, connecting for a grand slam just a few weeks after his dad passed away. Despite being such a bad hitter, providing no real thump in the lineup, having a really bad on-base percentage, and at this point not even stealing as many bases, despite all of that, Womack was able to stay afloat and start in most of his team's games that year. In 2024, Happy New Year by the way, this wouldn't fly. I just have a hard time seeing any team keeping around a player with Womack's numbers. Since Womack's D-backs days in 1999 and the early 2000s, analytics and sabermetrics have not only entered baseball and its front offices because of Moneyball, but it has completely taken over the game. Every team, more or less, has a lot of deep-thinking, analytical people working for them. If you don't, you're looked at as a dinosaur. There are ways to truly see the value in a player now, unlike any other era of baseball, and Tony Womack was not valuable, at least in terms of what we value today. So here comes Tony Womack to take on Mariano Rivera in Game 7 of the World Series in the biggest at-bat not just in his life, but in Arizona Diamondbacks history. Not that their history was very long in 2001, but even today, over 22 years later, you can look at this ninth inning moment as the most important moment ever for the franchise. And because of the fact that sabermetrics hadn't done their thing yet and entered baseball, Tony Womack gets a shot here. Because the D-backs and Major League Baseball teams as a whole were dumber and didn't understand how to accurately value players at the time, Tony Womack gets a shot here. Just like he did in the NLDS earlier that same postseason against the Cardinals, when he made that one count. In the ninth inning of a do-or-die win-or-go-home Game 5, Womack would loft a single into left field to break the 1-1 tie and walk things off for the D-backs. So he was clutch then. Would he be clutch in the most important moment possible? With his team now down in the game and the entire season just 2 outs from ending in heartbreak? What would he do? Well, the dinosaur age of baseball, one that was soon coming to an end but not yet, gave him a shot, and he made it count. Womack would pull his hands on a two-strike cutter by Mariano Rivera and line it into right field for a double. Not only just tying the game, but putting the winning run at third base. And all of a sudden, the Yankees were the ones feeling sick. 2 pitches later, Craig Counsell would get hit to load up the bases with still only 1 out for Luis Gonzalez to get another crack at Rivera, and he finished the job. Simply getting the bat on the ball and blooping it into shallow center field, scoring Bell and winning the World Series for the Diamondbacks in what is the most iconic moment in their history, understandably so. The winning hit, one that walks your team off to win it all, will of course be the most iconic one of them all. But that doesn't mean Womack's heroics 2 batters earlier should go unnoticed. As clutch and awesome as Gonzalez's game-winning hit was, the stakes weren't nearly as high as they were for Womack's hit. The bases were loaded, with only 1 out and the game was tied. Worst case scenario, Gonzalez grounds into a double play and the game continues. Womack grounds into a double play, the game ends, and the Yankees win their 4th straight championship. Gonzalez was also the team's best hitter by far, someone who had an MVP caliber season in 2001, so you also have to just fully realize just how improbable Womack's double was. For Womack to even make contact is crazy, let alone smoking a line shot down the right field line with 2 strikes. Mariano Rivera was the greatest reliever of all time, the greatest postseason pitcher of all time, someone who put up a career .77 ERA in 141 postseason innings. That is absurd. Analytics not being as highly regarded didn't matter with Rivera. He was one of those guys who you didn't need to see much data to find out how good and valuable he was. So you put this monster up against not just a below average hitter, but a pretty terrible hitter. I mean, arguably one of the greatest mismatches of all time. Such a lopsided face-off between the two in favor of Rivera, yet Womack was able to not just put the bat on the ball and bloop a hit or something and find grass, but line a shot down the line to tie the game up with 2 strikes. That's baseball for you. You will never be able to predict it. Ever. What happened here makes 0 sense, but that's one of the endless reasons that makes baseball the best. After becoming a champion in 2001, Tony Womack played several more seasons, 1 more full year in Arizona in 2002, before getting traded to the Rockies in 2003, and then getting traded again the same year to the Cubs, signed a contract with the Red Sox, but before ever playing a game with them was traded to the Cardinals. When the hell does that ever happen? A player getting traded to another team right after signing a contract with a new team? He was actually a lot closer to an average hitter than any other year in his career with the Cardinals in 2004. That was his best year, actually. He hit over 300, going on to sign with the Yankees for 2005, but was back to being awful, going to the Reds in 2006, but getting released, getting picked up by the Cubs on a minor league deal, only to get designated for assignment a couple months later, becoming a Washington National and receiving a non-roster invitation to spring training with them for 2007, until he'd get released during spring training, and that's when Tony Womack called it a career. Since then, there's not much to know about him. I'd say he flew pretty under the radar even while playing, so it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that he's really gone off the map in retirement. I did find an interview he did over a year ago where he discusses his life and baseball career, including of course his big hit in the World Series, and I found one particular moment of this interview I love, where Womack talks about that 9th inning being the first time he ever saw Mariano Rivera blink, implying that he and his team really got to Rivera mentally in that 9th inning.
But that's the first time, I've ever seen Mo blink on the mound. Mo blinked a lot on the mound. After he threw that ball, that first bunt away, and then after I got the hit, he really was blinking. Mo, that's the first time I ever seen Mo blink.
So during his playing days, Tony Womack was a nobody, a journeyman who kept his big league career alive because of how dumb teams were at the time, including the Diamondbacks, doing a couple things here and there to look like a good player when in reality he wasn't. But ironically, the D-backs being naive and not as advanced with analytics helped them win the World Series. Without Tony Womack, they don't beat the Yankees and win the World Series while also effectively ending New York's dynasty. Since 2001, the Yankees only have 1 ring in these past 22 plus years, which is not meeting their expectations. The New York Yankees dynasty ended that night, thanks to Tony Womack. If the D-backs were smarter and realized how bad Womack was, they wouldn't have gotten and then kept him, but they did, and because they did, Tony Womack ended up being responsible for the clutchest and most improbable and important moment in Arizona Diamondbacks history. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.